Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us tonight Mr. Harry Gross. Welcome, Harry.
Thank you, sir.
Of great attributes. I won't go into them all at this point, Harry.
I appreciate it.
But we'll go forward. So tonight we'll talk about tariffs again. Now, we visited that subject a number of times, quite a number of times. And one reason I think we're paying more attention to it than often we do is the importance of tariffs on the world economic order. And so what's happening now, up and down, a lot of things are happening. And I will start off by making this comment is the President Trump's use of tariffs may not stand a legal test. And so I believe what happened, all of these many attorney generals that complained and many business people complained, well, you don't really possess the power to do this. And so all of these cases were sent, I think, to the Court of International Affairs. I believe I said that correctly. And they decided that President Trump did not have the power to undertake this, since tariffs are in the Constitution are the normal purview of Congress, and there's a process by which they are instituted. And indeed, they've been one of our oldest really source of income for the country. It's very ancient, and the tariffs have gone up and down over the years. They've provoked different kinds of controversies. South Carolina almost left the Union in 1832 over a tariff dispute. Mm-hmm. The South traditionally opposed tariffs, and the North liked them for economic purposes. So we've had this story back and forth for a long time, and I think traditionally the story was, or most people thought, free trade was the way to go, and that would be the traditional American viewpoint, particularly that of the Republican Party. They were pretty much free traders. There's a long tradition of that. The idea would be that a comparative advantage existed in each country, and if each country or each area made use of its comparative advantage, then everyone would benefit. So that was kind of the idea. The one problem that's happened, I would say, as time has gone along, is the U.S. has been the market for any kind of purchases. They're a very wealthy country. They've got tremendous resources. The dollar is the reserve currency. As a result, the country can import all kinds of things and run a financial trade deficit, though not a trade deficit on services. So things may work themselves out. But the whole world, I would say, depends upon and benefits from free trade. Everyone does. And the question is the U.S. being ripped off? I'm going through a pretty long dissertation here, but I'll give you the football a little bit.
No worries.
So the idea about the U.S. losing money, running a trade deficit, which in fact it does. It imports all kinds of goodies and sends relatively little out of the country, though it does in some places. And the countries just benefit tremendously with this tariff arrangement. And the U.S. consumer benefits, though it could be said that the dollar is, if the situation continues, the economic underpinning of the country will suffer. There'll be a time when that will happen. A lot of this is referable not only to trade deficits, but the government's inability to balance its budget or come close to it. So those are sort of dual things. Well, having gone along this way, recently, I think in April, more or less, or almost directly after his election, President Trump said, I'm just going to change the tariffs. And we've been back and forth on this for a number of months, going up, going down. And I would say the initial feeling about this was that this was going to be a very bad policy. The country would suffer, all kinds of things would happen almost immediately. And I think President Trump and his allies have pointed out that was not the case, that things have rolled along pretty well right now, and all around the world, different countries are kowtowing to President Trump's request. And the country is getting money, and it doesn't seem like there's been an extraordinary amount of inflation. So right now, has the tide changed? I'll ask that question of you, is that now people are saying, as they have not in the past possibly, well, this is a really great policy. It's going to work out. What say you, Harry?
It's a terrible policy and it's not going to work out. And every bit of data we have says that's the case. Only echo chambers are saying that it's a great idea. If it was such a great idea, the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics would not have been fired.
Well, that's a separate issue.
That's it. The reason we'll go. I'm already touching on this though, is that in July alone, American businesses paid $29 billion in tariffs to the federal government. $29 billion from American businesses to the federal government that is not going to.
That was because they had overseas operations.
That's from imports. That was from imports, from importing inputs.
Things that they imported that they needed for their business, they needed for their business.
That they needed for their business.
So
that's steel makers, that's tool makers, that's all, all automakers are paying
this.
Just
to discuss President Trump's idea about this is, yes, there may be some transitory events, but soon there'll be thousands of factories here, all kinds of the jobs, the standard of living will rise, and besides all the money that comes in, the country will be economically secure in the time of war. So we could produce all our, shall I say, bananas, whatever we produce. We'll have it all here. We'll have medications. They'll come to the Swiss. We'll have to not produce them. We'll produce everything here. So all the employment will be great. The standard of living will be great. Things will be much better. So that's the argument. Maybe you could comment some more about that and the fact that so much has been imported into the country. Well, presumably they pay taxes on the things that have been imported, and the economic arrangement will change quite quickly. So if they've imported, I don't know, the idea would be they imported aluminum, shall we say, and soon the U.S. will produce huge amounts of aluminum here to our advantage.
I mean, I know that God has a special providence for drunks, fools in the United States of America, but we don't have aluminum reserves in our territory. We don't. 75%.
Bauxite, you mean?
Well, I mean, but 75% of aluminum that we use in this country is imported.
Right.
We can't change geology.
Right. Okay. All right. That's the point.
We can't grow bananas. We can't grow coffee. We can't grow and other things. There are a lot of things that we just cannot do in this country by virtue of climate and geology. Autarky, the idea of being totally self-sufficient, is the pipe dream of the 20th century. It was the great dream of the Third Reich, and it failed miserably. It was the great dream of the Soviet Union, and it failed miserably. Autarky is impossible in a modern world.
Many countries have attempted it in different times.
And they've all failed.
Well, and the question is, why would they do that? It's often a precursor for war. So you mentioned the Nazis. Well, all right, what are we going to do for petroleum? We don't have any. We'll try and turn coal into petroleum. We'll try and our chemists will do this.
Or we'll go conquer petroleum reserves in the Caucasus.
Or we don't have.
That's the solution to autarky's failure is conquest.
Well,
that's why free trade is the best guarantor of peace on this planet.
Or chemistry. For instance, getting I think nitrogen from Chile. So that was necessary to manufacture. Ammunition, and the German chemist produced that. Or rather, I think maybe won a Nobel Prize. Was that Haber? Did I get his name right? He was the chemist from France. Franz Haber. Yeah. So, but yes. So now you're making I sort of presented a Trump-esque argument, and I think your statement against it on this point would be. It's going to cause shortages and things. From the point of view of the U.S., there'll be shortages and an increase in cost.
Yes.
And now another argument that might be made is that, oh, okay, all this is going to cost so much and be that difficult. But right now we have this enormous positive event, AI. So we're going to increase, expenses will be diminished. The economy of the country can tolerate this
maybe
problem
so,
because of these advances.
And that will come at the cost of American workers and American families.
Well, now,
If we're bringing back factories, which we won't be for multiple reasons that I'll get into, but if we were bringing back factories, we're not going to be bringing back factory towns where we're employing tens of thousands of Americans. We're going to be creating robot cities that are going to be largely automated. Amazon's already pioneering this. The factories of the future are not the great agents of social and economic progress that they were in the 20th century, and that's a stretch. I mean, factories weren't great places out for most of the 20th century, certainly not in the 19th century, and without strong unions, they're not great places at all to work with.
You don't think this is like Metropolis,
No.
the famous German 1920s
No.
movie? Well, it's still a nightmarish place. Metropolis was kind of a nightmarish place.
Yes.
They had a lot of workers, and they had, the beautiful robot or whatever.
Yeah, the allegory for there's the Whore of Babylon, yes,
Something like that.
from Revelation.
Something like that. Well, a really interesting movie. But having said that, there are other cards in the deck, I guess is what a Trump person would say. There
Yes.
are other things going to happen, and let us suppose that the standard of living may diminish for some people, may diminish, but other groups would not. And so one thing maybe that Trump might say is many people in the country have been injured substantially by the event that took place in the North American Free Trade Pact. And just going back, all right, supposing you're a worker, I've been injured, I've lost the Deer Hunter, the movie, whatever. I've lost my job. It's been terrible. The whole community has just been ravaged and horrible. And as Ross Perot said, all the jobs that are here, it'll be a great sucking sound, and they will go to Mexico. And indeed, one may say that. So the employment arrangement for a certain group of people that will say they were worked on the line, the GM line, producing cars or whatever. Everything is being made in Mexico or wherever. I'll pick any country you want. So thousands and thousands of jobs have gone away.
Yep.
Now, the other thing that's happened with this would be the multiplier effect that might happen when jobs are here. So if let's suppose a big factory is put in, I don't know, Dearborn, Michigan. We're going to produce whatever we produce there, and the people will go in and work, and they'll spend their money wherever they spend it there. And if the factory is in Juarez or Monterrey, Mexico, all the money will be there, all the multiplier effect will be there, and so there's it's a two-edged sword to have jobs outside the country, at least from that point of view. So do you have a thought
In
about
an
that?
isolated bubble, yes. But at the same time, right, yes, there has been what we call creative destruction in economic terms, right? That when technology advances, old jobs, old industries are swept away. I went to college in Appalachia. I lived amongst the bones of the coal industry, the mining industry. That it's the...
Swanee, I don't know.
Swanee sits on the edge of the fourth poorest county in the country.
Well,
In the country. Tracy City was at one point the meth capital of the country.
The
Cumberland Plateau. I mean, but this is a major. It's in the heart of coal country, but we're getting distracted.
Because, in other words, the jobs have left.
Yes, because the jobs left. But my point is, and there's always a cost to progress. There's always a cost to economic advancement. But in the aggregate, right, this country has improved and reaped benefits from free trade dramatically over the past century. And there are always people left behind, and it is my personal philosophy that the purpose of government is to help protect those who are left behind and to help make sure that those who lose their jobs to the engines of progress have the opportunities to enjoy a good and helpful and fulfilling life. But that's a whole separate philosophical argument. At the end of the day, though, right, at the end of the day, none of this is going to happen because the environment in which these tariffs have been put in will make such ideas of autarky and these dreams of factories coming back literally impossible. They will be legally impossible, they'll be economically impossible. because they are so arbitrary and capricious. They are changing so regularly. If there was federal legislation along the lines of the McKinley tariffs or Smoot-Hawley, as bad as an idea as they would be, there would at least be a legal framework, and there would be a clear set upon which companies and corporations can build expectations and plan to bring back stuff. It's going to take years to bring factories back, to reshore production, to totally alter supply chains. And there are very valid arguments for that in some places, and I think it would be great. Whatever we can bring back, we should, where it's economically viable. But because these arrangements are so arbitrary and capricious, and because they are completely at the whim of the president, there is no way for companies to accurately plan. And no one wants to make an investment in spending tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of dollars on reshoring production when the tariffs might change tomorrow, or after the midterm elections. If the makeup of Congress changes, then there might be legislation that passes that alters this, or the courts might finally give a decision. And so, in an atmosphere of regulatory uncertainty, no one's going to want to invest in this process. I know that regulation is a dirty word for some people, but the advantage of regulation is it gives a sense of order. It gives rules to play by. That's the great innovation of American legislation in the 20th century, beginning with the New Deal, is it created rules and systems with which everyone could work in. And even if you disagree with the system, or maybe the system didn't work as well as it should have, there were rules of the road that everyone was supposed to play by, and it meant that people knew what they could invest in, they could take risks, they knew what they could calculate fairly accurately the costs and benefits of a given action and behave accordingly. In an environment as chaotic as the current White House, there is no way you can do an accurate cost-benefit analysis. And so I think corporate America right now is just sitting back and trying to wait and see what's going to happen, because if they spend all this money to bring back manufacturing and then the tariffs disappear, and now all of a sudden it's not economically viable anymore.
Well,
and they're losing money. They're just out millions of money. That's a huge risk to take.
Actually, that's good, Harry, that you sort of read my mind in a way. We've talked a little bit about the economic benefits, yes, no, what the argument is. Well, you had two famous legal words, arbitrary and capricious. I think lawyers love those words, and they certainly are applicable to the governing system that's going on now. And I would say this is not the traditional American governing system. There are checks and balances there. You touted regulation. Well, we could get into that a little more as to how, whether regulation is not arbitrary and capricious. I would make
it
the
can
case.
Be sometimes, but
well, I think it certainly can be and is in many circumstances, depending on how far the regulatory reach goes, and then when the regulators, what they decide to do about it and what their viewpoints are, and they could really attempt to alter the country as they do, and in an arbitrary, capricious way, I would say. I'd let it go at that. But it's certainly true right now. What's going on with the White House is that one is basically breathless about what's going to happen next. There's not any security about the governmental policy, and well, it's not supposed to be that way. There's supposed to be, it's a three-headed governance arrangement, the three great branches there, and the courts are supposed to basically rein in the executive or Congress, as far as that goes, if the Constitution is violated. So there are these kind of golden tablets that the country possesses. So it means there are limits to whatever happens. And when President Trump came in, there was certainly, I listened to a very knowledgeable legal figure discussing this, a very neutral one too. Well, what's going to happen is there's going to be a clash because President Trump's viewpoint is this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do. And there are restraints that are imposed by the judicial system. And they're certainly going through that pretty readily. And one can never depend on whatever's going on. And it is, I think, pretty contrary to the American system to have an elected person, and barely elected, shall I say, but in the White House with a substantial animus against his enemies, wanting to do something, not only his domestic enemies, but overseas enemies in many places. And the tariffs are being used as basically a form of war, attacking different countries, different civilizations, different governments, or attempting in Brazil, maybe a scenario where we're going to charge the Brazilian people. I've decided to do that, charge millions of dollars, and I'm going to just inflict these rules on the 350 million Americans when they drink their coffee. This is what coffee is going to cost. Why is that? Is it in my best interest to pay so much for coffee? Well, the Brazilian government needs to be punished, and indeed, the government is certainly far from perfect, I would say. Very, very, very far from perfect, and makes many errors. And Lula, the president, is certainly loaded with defects, lots and lots of corruption, lots and lots of problems. But is that an appropriate thing to do with tariffs? Or, for instance, India. It's a huge country, 1.4 billion people there, precarious in many ways. So they say that when the Russian war broke out and with Ukraine, and it was very difficult to get petroleum. Things were bad, and they tried to find a way to do that, and they successfully did it. A good capitalist way to do things. And then the U.S. says, well, all right, we're punishing you by raising tariffs enormously. And when the tariffs are raised, they have lots of impacts, tremendous impacts. And certainly they are a tax and expense for the American people that didn't go through the normal way that it happens. So it's kind of like an executive figure basically just passing laws at a whim.
One might say taxation without representation.
Yes. I mean, and then can you really be representative? I mean, how much do your congressman represent you or whatever?
Yeah,
it's a whole other story, depending on what your viewpoints are. It would be fair to say many times people think they're not representative. Well, just on this subject, there's capricious, arbitrary. It disturbs the world order, and probably one of the biggest things that we haven't spoken much about, maybe we have on pass on, but the world is out there, and the U.S. is the linchpin of the world, and they have world responsibilities. So if you're the president, you obviously the voters are in your camp, something you have to pay a lot of attention to. But the world is a big place, 8 billion people there, and it's fragile. So money is going here, money is going there. Maybe someone in Indonesia is depending on producing tennis shoes, and they can't do that, and they lose their job. And it could well be some other great country moves into the U.S. position, aka China. 1.4 billion people. They've got their own culture, and they're allegedly a post-colonial country, whatever that means. But so they have a natural alliance with many people around the equator that have experienced colonialism, and the U.S. Occupies this position to their credit, to their advantage. And how are things going to go if the U.S. turns into be a very bad neighbor? If you remember the Franklin Roosevelt good neighbor thing, well, it's hard to say we're a good neighbor. Is there anybody in the world now that thinks the U.S. is a good neighbor? I mean, there could be, but I mean, it's certainly not so much. Israel, yes,
Israel probably does,
Well, that's quite good, Harry. I think you're right on that. That's a whole other subject.
That is a whole other subject, but yes.
There is at least one that's good. I didn't think of that. But yes, and so around the world, people are fairly concerned about this arrangement. And what happens if intellectual arrangements that go on when people say, "I'm going to read your chemistry book. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Why don't you come to this country and you can do this and you can do this?" It's a whole litany of things, and sort of, you could say, it's isolating the U.S. as a nation state, which is a big deal. We're going to not be part of the rest of the world, and we're going to act for our own personal advantage. Even though our own personal advantage is often difficult to say, and it could be that if Japan, for instance, is a peaceful, productive nation, not trying to take over the rest of the world, that's really quite good. And if we maintain a good relationship with the Japanese on it, there's a secondary factor in that, not just our economic arrangements. But if the whole world turns into snarling animals, each country attempting to give the other one a nip, that's a path, a terrible path. And one of the biggest things, in a way, is the world order, which apparently you know a lot about, which is fine. But the world order, the post-World War II arrangements, has really tremendously profited everything. And now, what's going on is the world order is under a lot of assault, and one can see, I think, the President Trump, a lot of his constituency would be people that feel like they've been bruised and neglected by the world order. And they would say, well, the really deal is these rich people have put a car factory in Juarez and taken my job away, and now I have nothing except maybe amphetamines and whatever, beer or whatever. It's a very terrible situation. Life is very difficult, but it's much better in Juarez now. And who did this, and did I have a say in it? And Ross Perot had a say. You know, he really made a point about this, and that's kind of how Bill Clinton got in office. Bill Clinton and the Democratic Party sort of got in office because, in many ways, the Republicans pushed this. They pushed the idea of transnational trade. Jobs go there. We're free traders. Things will be good. And many people got quite wealthy in this. Many people. I've had discussions with people that showed up in China and they did this, and the Chinese workforce was absolutely unbelievable. They worked 80 hours a week. They never took 1 week off a year. They went back to their native village. So their workforce was extraordinary, the ability to do stuff, their energy, all these really tremendous advantages, and people profited from that. They made a huge amount of money. So if you look at the billionaires out there, many of them have been benefited, as well as just people that invested in the stock market. Lots and lots of things have happened. But if you're a person outside of this, you certainly have had a nip there, and that nothing has replaced it. And also, experts appear to tell you what's wrong with your behavior, and you've got to do this and this. And so there's a huge number of people that feel marginalized by the world order. They don't. That's the way they see it. And what seems to be happening is President Trump, particularly with his trade policy, is having a substantial impact, which is not a good thing.
No.
Well, is war coming, Harry?
I don't think with us. I think we'll probably stay out of most things unless someone's ego gets in the way. But I think war is coming for most of the rest of the world.
Yes.
The civilization is a very thin veneer that's held in place by people collectively agreeing to follow certain rules. And when the most powerful country in the history of the planet decides that rules that it helped write are no longer worth enforcing, why should anybody else follow those rules? And once one block, one domino of this system starts to fall, the rest could collapse pretty easily. So it might seem isolated, it might seem this to be a silly thing to be discussing, but these tariffs and this violation of decades of economic consensus, not just in the United States, but around the world, is going to have serious knock-on effects for the entire planet.
Now, one final comment on that is the idea that trade produces peace.
Yes.
Now, that might not be always the case. I mean, I think with Nazi Germany or with the U.S. going back and forth with Japan before World War II.
Well, I would remind you that one of the reasons Japan
I know
pushed
that.
it was because the United States cut off
I know
exports
that.
and ceased trade.
I know that. I was about to go through that on that point, Harry. But sometimes trade can cause problems. And if, in fact, the trade had not started when it did, there'd been another methodology by which Japan followed its path. There wouldn't have been the animus as much between the two countries.
Well, they would have just gone to war sooner.
And, well, I don't know. So trade itself can cause quarrels.
I fundamentally disagree with that.
Well, even the fact that it never could, you might say generally it didn't. I mean, generally it was beneficial. But there can be situations where things can happen. And so, for instance, one country starts to produce something the other country needs, and then that country cuts it off, or like rare minerals from China. So you could say, all right, China's cutting off our rare minerals. And how did that happen? Well, we had a trading arrangement with them, and they had a comparative advantage.
But I would, once again, every example you're pointing out is the cessation of trade leading to war, which to me proves the point that free trade guarantees peace. While those goods are flowing, while there are low barriers to entry, while there's market access to these goods, peace is possible. When that market access ceases, when trade barriers are erected, whether through blockades, through embargoes, through tariffs, that's when we get conflict.
Well, I won't get into this, but there's a big argument about that, and I think many people would say that it's a mistake to think that that you've established free trade and there'll be no problems. It'll ease things out, and I'll get past this point. But sometimes a dependency is created, and a vulnerability is created with trade. And if you, just to go back to the autocracy kind of thing with what Trump's doing and on, the trading arrangements may suddenly flip for whatever reason. And if these dependencies have occurred, then it could cause all kinds of ill will. That's kind of my thought. All right, Harry, you have any final thoughts on this?
No, I think I've said my piece.
Well, good. All right. Well, welcome. Well, thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
erudite comments. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Always a pleasure.